Tanner here with Utility Disc Golf. Today I'm going to be doing a quick disc dyeing video. So I'm going to pick a disc and we're going to pick a theme, and I'm going to show you step by steps what I do to put a cool image on a disc. Let's get into it. Alright guys, so first thing you want to do when you're dyeing a disc is selecting the right canvas. You want to make sure that you're using a premium plastic disc like S-Line or C-Line, Lucid, Gold Line, Fusion, Star, Champion. Don't use anything like R Pro or DX or D-Line or P-Line or Classic or Prime plastics because they aren't going to take dye, and if they do, they're not going to last very long. And the premium plastic discs, if they're in white plastic or a lighter disc color, you're going to be able to get a lot better colors on it and a lot more truer colors. So I'm going to look through my stash and see if I have a good canvas so we can start our dye. Alright guys, so we're going to choose a disc for our design. Now when choosing a disc for disc dyeing, the best disc that you can choose is a premium plastic disc. That is a disc that's in S-Line, C-Line, 750, 400, Star, Champion, Lucid, Opto, Gold Line. All those discs that are usually found in a driver plastic, those are going to be the best ones for dyeing. And if you can get it in white or a lighter color, that's going to be the best, because the lighter the disc, the better the colors that you want to put on the disc will show. So if you're putting white, or if you're putting red dye on a white disc, it's going to come out red, but if you're putting red dye on a yellow disc, it's going to come out orange because it's an additive process. You can't really change the way the dye interacts with the original color of the disc. So for this example, I'm going to do a factory second FD3 that has a bunch of stamps on it. I got this from last year's mystery box. And it's a pretty cool looking disc. It's got a couple cool looking stamps on it, but I'm going to wipe all these and we're going to put a better design on it. The one thing about factory seconds or double stamp discs is they're nice for disc dyeing because they're typically cheaper. They're about 10 bucks. And the negative to a double stamp disc is that the hot stamper usually leaves an indentation in the plastic. And so if you're putting a stencil on the disc, the dye can sometimes seep underneath the stencil and you'll get some bleeds. A lot of people that I know kind of use that to their advantage. I know Mike Kemp, who does a lot of great dyes. Sometimes he'll intentionally let the dye seep underneath the stencil and he gets a cool like smoky effect. We're not going to try to do that today. We're going to try to get a nice clean stencil and some nice bold colors on this. So I'm going to show you about wiping the disc, and then we're going to start designing our design. So when wiping a stamp off a disc, the most common method I've seen is using a cotton ball or like a paper towel or a rag and soaking it in a little bit of acetone. So we're just going to get that wet, and then the stamps sometimes will bleed, so you kind of want to be careful with this, but we're just going to start wiping it on. And this one has a blue stamp, so work in small areas so you don't let that that blue or teal stamp really get into the disc very much. We're going to dye over the top of this, so I'm not super worried. You're going to probably go through a couple cotton swabs just to make sure that the stamp comes off clean. And it looks like this one actually had a night strike stamp underneath it, which is kind of cool. I never noticed that before. Alright, so that took a little longer than I thought. The Nate Perkins stamp that was underneath it, which is a stamp that I've never seen before, so if anyone has any information on the earlier stamp that I showed, let me know, because it looked like it was a Tour Series stamp, but I don't think that was on the Nate Perkins Night Strikes. It might have just been his own Tour Series. So here's our final product after wiping the stamp. Nice clean canvas to start working on. All right, now that our canvas is clean, we're going to go to the computer and see if we can find a design that we like and tweak it a little bit to make it our own. It's Friday the 13th, so I'm going to see if I can find something that kind of fits with that theme, and we'll see what we come up with. I'll send the design from probably Illustrator or Photoshop into the Cricut Design Studio, and my Cricut vinyl cutter will cut out the design so I don't have to do any of that tedious work, and then we can see if we can put it on the disc. Alright, so after some designing, this is what I came up with. A nice Jason mask, and we're going to cut it out on the Cricut. Super simple. A lot of disc dyers have trouble getting their stencils centered on the disc, so I'm going to show you guys my trick for putting the stencil on in the exact center, exactly where you want it every single time. It's a little trick I picked up from putting screen protectors on, and it works pretty good. So let's get into showing you how it works. So you have your vinyl, which has the design already stenciled out, thanks to my Cricut. And now you're going to take any kind of transfer paper. Right now I have this roll of clear transfer paper, so I'm going to cut off a piece that'll cover this. So this is pretty straightforward. You just lay the transfer paper over the vinyl. Try to lay it down as smooth as you can. And then I usually work from the middle and work my way out. So now that the transfer paper is on there good, we're going to take the paper backing off of the vinyl. And we did our job, so it's all stuck. So now this is the sticky side of the vinyl. I gave myself some nice guides that I can see through with the marker from the Cricut. And I have my disc here. Now the trick is you get a squirt bottle. This is filled up with water and then like a drop, maybe 2 drops of dish soap. Not a whole lot. As you can see, there's a little bit of suds. So you're going to make sure this is on the misting setting, and we're just going to mist generously on the vinyl so it doesn't make it sticky. Basically the water is going to evaporate or get squeegeed out later on, and the soap is going to make it so that it's kind of like a nice lubricant, so we can make sure we get the disc in the right spot. So now I'm going to spray the disc, and these shouldn't stick to each other, or not a whole lot. So I'm going to try to line up this center dot with the square that I put in there earlier. Kind of eyeball it at first, and then it's good to shine it up to the light. To see if you're centered. And we're not that center, so I'm going to try to readjust this, but as you can see, you can get a really accurate job when you use this method, because you can take the vinyl on and off until you're ready, and then just squeegee the water out, and then maybe use an air or blow dryer, and you can get all the water out from underneath. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with where the stencil is. Now I'm going to just squeegee from the middle going out, because I know the middle is centered. And I'm just squeegeeing all the water out so that the vinyl will stick to the disc a little bit more, and then that'll give me enough stickiness to be able to get the transfer paper off. So that's probably about good. Now I'm going to flip the disc over and try to pull the transfer paper off the vinyl. So now we have the vinyl off, or the transfer paper off. The vinyl is really not that sticky anymore, so I'm going to go blow dry the vinyl and squeegee the top off to get all the extra water underneath, and I'll come back. Alright, I just got back from blow drying the rest of the water and air bubbles out. As you can see, it looks pretty good. So now I'm going to fold the vinyl in. We're going to dip dye this because that's the easiest way to get black on, in my opinion. So we're just making this nice and tight, nice and snug around the edge. Still a little wet, but it's sticky enough that it'll dry out. And if you do this fast enough, the vinyl is sticky enough to give you a good stencil, but it's also not like dried onto the disc, so it's not going to tear your stamp off if you were dyeing over a stamp or doing like a border. So this is our nice vinyl wrap disc. And now we're just going to take away the spots where we want to have the black dye. So in this one, it's going to be everything except for the triangles and the utility logo. So all these little circles need to come off, and if you are confused about what parts of the stencil needed to come off, just if you're going to do black, you want to take off the parts of the design that you want to be black. So it might be a little confusing if you have a darker vinyl that you're using, but I would just go back and reference your original image and just double check before you tear these off, because it can be a pain to put them back on. So that's what our final Jason mask is going to look like. All these spots are going to be black. And I might go over these triangles in the logo just a little bit because I want to make sure that no black gets in those little cracks. Try to save it a little bit, give it a nice clean look at the end. But we're on to the dyeing phase. Alright, so we're in the kitchen. I got an old pan, got it at Goodwill. Do not use your cooking pans because you do not want to eat off of pans that you dye in. Just a disclaimer. So we have our pan. I have a mixture of black iodide poly with water. Nothing special. Just a little bit of powder dye mixed with water. We're going to dump this into the pan. Maybe add a little bit more water. And we're going to turn the heat up to like a very low. We just want to make this warmer water than room temperature, but we don't want it boiling because that'll warp the plastic. So we just want it warm enough to kind of open the plastic up and penetrate the disc, but we don't want it so warm that it's going to start warping the plastic. Alright, so now I'm going to drop the disc onto the die. You want to make sure you do it one end at a time so that no air bubbles get underneath it. So just like that, and the disc is going to float, and we're going to let it go for probably like I don't know, 15 minutes. I usually check it a couple times and make sure the plastic's not getting too hot. Alright, so it's been sitting in the die on really low heat for probably 15 minutes, and it's not going to get completely black, but it is pretty close. So as you can see, our stencil's looking pretty good. I'm going to dry this off and give you guys a better look. Alright, so the disc is out of the die and it's all dried off. I masked off a couple of these other areas because I want to dye them red, and I didn't want them to get any black dye on them and make a weird outline, so that's what these are. And I'm going to apply the red dye with a Q-tip and probably worm dye just because I think it's the easiest to do right now, and I don't think I have any other red dye mixed up. So I'm going to take off these little extras real carefully, and I'm going to weed the rest of this design. So now I just need to dye these and we should be pretty much done. Alright, so I have some red quick coat worm dip. This is really good, easy dye for disc dyeing, and just some Q-tips. And I'm just gonna undo the dye, get some dye on top of the Q-tip, and I'm just gonna really easily dye over these spots that I want to be red. As you can see, the worm dye like penetrates really fast. I believe it has some acetone in it, which is probably the reason. But I might just do 2 coats of this and it'll probably be good. You don't want it to be too wet, because if you get too much liquid underneath or around the stencil, the acetone in the dye will start to peel up your stencil and you won't have a good harsh line. So with this utility, really detailed part, I'm going to make sure that the dye is pretty much washed off, and I'm just going to dab it on. Alright, so I went over these a couple times with the red worm dye. As you can see on the back, it penetrates pretty quickly. I'm going to wash the front of this off with some rubbing alcohol with the cotton swabs and maybe some Q-tips, just to make sure that all the dye is off the disc. Because once I take the vinyl off, if the red is still on the disc, it could smear the red dye onto the white glow plastic and it'll make the disc look really crappy, and we don't want that. So I'm going to try to clean it off as best I can, and then we'll do the reveal. So I have 99% and 70%. I like to kind of rinse things off with 70%, just because you can actually dye discs with rubbing alcohol, and I find that the 99% helps dye discs a little bit better. Not as good as acetone, but I find that the 70% will pull off dye, but it won't make the dye active again, if that makes sense. So I'm just wiping over these red areas, trying to do my best to clean all that worm dye off the disc. And I would probably use gloves, but I don't have any with me right now. Just gonna have some red fingers. Alright, I think that's good enough before we tear off all the vinyl. So now I'm going to tear off all the vinyl and we'll see what the disc looks like. As you can see, the disc is perfectly centered. We have about, I don't know, a couple of millimeters on top and a couple millimeters on bottom. Pretty easy to see. Perfectly centered disc because of that method I showed you earlier. And there we are, our Jason disc. We still have to clean off some of the vinyl stickiness, but that's basically our final design. I might add a little bit around the borders, we'll see, but I think that looks pretty sweet. Alright, so this is our final product after getting all the sticky vinyl stuff off. It's looking pretty good, just a little bit of issues up here, but that was because there's a lot of stamps on this disc. You can see in the middle here maybe. There's like, it looks like 10 different Discmania badges right in the middle. But overall, I'm really liking it. I think I just need to add a little bit of texture to the outside to make the the mask really pops, so that's what I'm going to try to do here. So this doesn't have to be super perfect, so I'm just going to take a little bit of this transfer paper and cover it up. It should be enough to mask off the inside of the mask. Alright, it's not a perfect mask, but it's going to cover up the main design. And now we're going to add a little bit of texture. Alright, so just finished up the edges, practice my blood splatter analysis, try to get a variation of blood splatter and drops. I think it looks pretty cool. Added a little bit of texture to the rim. The inside still looks nice and clean, nice and white. I'd say that's a done disc. Alright guys, thanks for watching my video of the FD3 Friday the 13th die. I think it turned out pretty sweet. Hope you guys learned a couple things from my different techniques that I like to use. This is going to be a giveaway disc, so if you're seeing this in the future, it's probably already given away, but I'm going to be trying to give it away the weekend of Friday the 13th. I'll make a post about it on Friday the 13th, and then I'll select a winner through however I think to do the giveaway. So thanks for watching the video. If you guys liked the video, please leave us a like. If you have any questions about disc dyeing or anything like that, leave them down in the comment section. I'll try to answer them. If you guys like to see more disc dyeing videos or tutorials like this, let me know. This video is kind of a quick edited video, more of a vlog style, so I can put out more content. So if you guys like how this video is and don't mind that there's no shot trackers and graphics like I do in my disc reviews, then leave me a comment below telling me what you liked. And until next time, stay fly.